I'm your guide today, a science communication specialist who spends long days coaxing stories out of very old rocks. And I want to take you to a world before animals, before shells, before bones. When life was soft, tiny, and everywhere, picture Earth roughly 2.5 billion years ago. The sky hazy with volcanic gases, the oceans green with dissolved iron, continents low and mostly barren, tides sliding across flats coated in living mats. Those mats were communities of microbes stacking layer upon layer into low domes. We still find them as fossils called stromatolites, each season recording a thin film of growth like a page in a diary. Many microbes were anaerobes that thrived without oxygen and found oxygen toxic. Others drew energy from sulfur or iron. But one lineage discovered an audacious chemistry. Cyanobacteria learned to split water using sunlight, hold onto the hydrogen, and release the oxygen as waste. At first that oxygen had plenty to do, because the oceans were hungry. It rusted dissolved iron into reddish particles that rained to the seafloor, building banded iron formations, dark gray and brick red stripes that shine today in ancient quarries. Think of those bands as the planet's first oxygen budget. Each stripe a transaction, oxygen spending itself on metal and minerals rather than drifting free. For a long time sinks outpaced sources, but the sun kept rising. The mats kept pulsing, and oxygen slowly filled every corner it could reach. Evidence for this slow drama hides in geochemistry. Certain sulfur isotopes stop behaving in a quirky mass-independent way once oxygen climbs. That signal vanishes in rocks after about 2.4 billion years ago. That is our marker for the Great Oxidation Event, not a single day or storm, but a long turning of a planetary dial. I remember kneeling by an outcrop with Dr. Maya Ortiz, a field paleontologist. She also paints wildlife on the weekends to unwind. Tracing my finger across a ripple of stromatolite and feeling dizzy at the time scale. She told me she took up painting because field seasons are lonely, and color helps her process the gray of the rock record. That day, we argued gently about what to call cyanobacteria, because blue-green algae sounds friendly, yet their waste once suffocated neighbors by the trillion. Still, they were not villains. They were innovators doing what life always does, taking energy where it can and changing the environment as a side effect. As oxygen seeped into seawater and then into the air, methane was oxidized to carbon dioxide and water. Methane, a potent greenhouse gas produced by other microbes, weakened the greenhouse blanket. The climate may have cooled into long ice ages called the Huronian glaciations. Perhaps even global snowball episodes with ice reaching the tropics. Though the debate continues among specialists about just how deep the freeze went, and how often it returned, whether the ice wrapped the planet entirely or only for a time and place. The combination of oxygen, toxicity, and climate swings pressed many early lineages to the edge. Some mats retreated to protected coves, some microbes escaped into sediments, some adapted metabolic shields, and countless others simply vanished, leaving behind quiet gaps where their chemical traces used to be. When I teach this moment to students, I tell them the first mass extinction did not involve teeth or claws. It involved a colorless gas and the invisible architecture of metabolism. Oxygen was a catastrophe for some and a ladder for others. And that double truth is part of what makes Earth's story human enough for us to recognize ourselves in it. Before oxygen could accumulate in the sky, it had to exhaust the planet's appetites. Those appetites were many. Iron in the sea, sulfur in volcanic gases, organic bits of dead microbes, and the very rocks on the seafloor that greedily took oxygen into their minerals. Only after these sinks were saturated did oxygen begin to spill over into the atmosphere, where sunlight forged an ozone layer that thinned the harsh ultraviolet glare, and quietly set the stage for later life to leave the water. In ancient river sandstones younger than this shift, we stop finding pebbles of inoxidized minerals, like pyrite and uranite, because once oxygen is around they simply do not survive the journey. The sand tells us the air had truly changed. I keep a palm-sized slab of banded iron on my desk, smooth as chocolate and steel. When I hit a wall while writing, I flip it over in my hands and think about patient chemistry, about time moving grain by grain. Maya jokes that I am biased toward microbes because they make tidy stories. But microbes are honest. They do not negotiate with physics. They use what they can use and they leave evidence. That is how the Great Oxidation Event reads to me. Not a single catastrophe, but a long sequence of adjustments. A planet learning new rules because small organisms tried a new way to live too. By the time oxygen took hold, the rules of habitability had shifted. And what had once been a universal solvent of opportunity had become a corrosive threat to many neighbors. If you want to feel that pivot with your hands, visit a rock shop and ask for a slice of banded iron. It is planet-scale accounting you can polish. The dark bands rich in iron minerals laid down when oxygen met a saturated sea. The red bands the rest itself settling like snow. Out in the field with Mayo, we hiked to an abandoned mine where the cliff face gleamed in alternating stripes. Our volunteer, Leo, a wildlife artist who joined us after recovering from a bout of burnout, set up his easel and painted the layers as if they were ribs on a giant fossil. He told me that painting rocks felt like painting time that had held still long enough for him to breathe again. And I understood, because everyone on the team had their own reason for chasing deep history. When the present feels noisy, the Archean whispers. Back in the lab, we looked for the subtle signatures of a planet breathing differently. Red beds, those rusty terrestrial sandstones that arrive after oxygen rises. The disappearance of detrital pyrite, the way sulfur isotopes stop wearing their strange mask once ozone shields the sky. All these clues agreeing even when they came from distant continents. Some researchers argue that a shortage of nickel, the metal methanogenic microbes love, may have starved their methane production, amplifying the cool down. Others point to the continental growth and volcanic rhythms that tweak the balance between gases. And the honest answer is that several levers likely moved together. When students ask me for a single cause, I tell them Earth is more orchestra than soloist. And what we hear in the rock record are chords. For the living world, the chords sounded harsh at first. Oxygen is reactive. It steals electrons. It tears at delicate molecules. And without enzymes to manage it, cells suffer oxidative stress. Microbial communities that had thrived in anoxic brines retreated to deeper pores, lagoons, and sediments, while lineages capable of handling oxygen gained room, inventing defenses like superoxide dismutase and catalase, refining respiration to extract far more energy per meal. That energy dividend mattered. Oxygen-based respiration returns a rich payback. And over immense time it enabled larger cells, more elaborate metabolisms, and eventually the complex choreography of eukaryotes and animals, though those chapters would come much later far. The lesson that settles on me is not triumphalist, but practical. Innovation often creates externalities, and we survive by learning the tools to cope with our neighbor's waste. By turning hazards into resources, to ground that in a place you might visit. Consider modern stromatolites in Shark Bay, Western Australia. I dove there once with a research team to compare microbial textures, and what struck me was not the alien look, but the ordinary patience of ripples stacking. Fish nosing by, sunlight humming across sky-blue water. The mats there build by trapping grains and cementing them with sticky biofilms. And although the chemistry is different from the ancient seas, the logic is continuous. Microbes collaborate, compete, and engineer their environment. A child on the pier asked if the rocks were alive. Our local guide, a community storyteller who teaches school groups, said yes and no at the same time. The shapes are mineral, the builders are alive and always changing. I keep that answer close when talking about extinction and the oxygen revolution. Because the dead do not sign their names, they vanish into trends. And yet the living inscriptions remain in structures and isotopes that record both loss and resilience. In the geochemical archives, we also see what looks like an overshoot after the first rise. a time known as the Lomagundi event when carbon isotopes swing unusually heavy, implying a burst of organic burial and perhaps higher oxygen for a while before slipping back. It reads like a learning curve, a planet exploring the settings on a new thermostat. Maya once compared it to a studio adjusting lights for a portrait. Too bright, then dim, then just enough that the features appear. And Leo laughed because he knew the feeling of overworking a canvas, of adding and subtracting color until the subject finally breathes. Our team breathed easier too after we fixed a busted pump that had flooded the core freezer. A small modern crisis that had us mopping meltwater at midnight. When the fans kicked on and the temperature began to drop, we cheered. Because keeping archives stable is a quiet promise to the future. Promises are what oxygen made possible for life as well. Promises of stored energy, of new gradients to climb, of molecules that could carry signals and build scaffolds truly robust. And that is why some lineages flourished while others faded into the background. Indeed, standing in front of a wall of ancient stone, I sometimes imagine the first sunrise that met a faintly oxygenated sky. Not different in color to our eyes, but newly dressed in chemistry that would ripple through everything that followed. The animals we love to picture, the trilobites and ammonites and dinosaurs and whales, all belong to chapters much later. Yet they are sequels made possible by the same prologue in which microbes rewrote the air. Oxygen gave later life a larger energy budget. It allowed collagen and bones and brains. It built the ozone umbrella that softened radiation, and it let bodies dream their way into movement and sight. Still, I do not tell this as a straight path to us. Evolution is a branching river. Many lines went nowhere, and many others went somewhere marvelous that did not include humans. If you could have walked a shoreline before the Great Oxidation Event, you might have seen gummy films puckering in the sun, mats burping tiny bubbles, and you might have smelled sulfur in the breeze. A billion years later, the same shoreline could have offered a different perfume, rust and salt and the subtle bite of oxygen. In the cores we read this as numbers and minerals. In the field we read it as textures and colors. And in our lives we read it as a parable about side effects. Because the waste of one species became the weather for all. During our last week in the field, Leo finished a canvas he had been struggling with, a view of a tidal flat at dawn with low domes shining under a sheet of water. He had started it when he could not see how to return to art after burnout. And he ended it kneeling in the dust, smiling through tears. He said the painting finally worked when he stopped trying to make it dramatic and let the light be patient. And Maya nodded because field science is like that. You wait, you try, you fail, you try again, and time itself does most of the lifting. On the flight home, I wrote in my notebook that oxygen's lesson is humility. A small organism can alter a world, and the changes it releases will not ask permission, and even good changes can hurt. That feels relevant when we talk about our own century, about carbon and warming and acidifying seas. The rock record does not give us a direct script for modern problems, but it hands us a mirror, and we can choose to learn faster than a planet without planning ever could. One way we learn is by listening across disciplines, letting geology talk to chemistry, letting biology talk to history, letting artists sit with scientists so that language stretches enough to carry wonder without losing accuracy. When students ask me what survived the oxygen crisis, I tell them that cooperation did. Because microbial mats are unions of difference. They share byproducts, swap genes, and spread risk. And the rock record shows that diversity has been a survival tactic since long before the word existed. In class we pass around a stromatolite slice and a small vial of hematite grains. I ask the room to imagine a world where breathing is a lethal choice for most creatures. Then to imagine a world where breathing is the platform for animals that sing. Both are earth, separated by patience. Some nights I step outside and try to smell the faint metallic flavor of oxygen the way winter air sometimes tastes. And I think of the buried iron that once buffered the seas, of sulfur losing its peculiar isotopic signature, of nickel-starving methanogens, of a million subtleties that added up to a new sky. Maya says that is a poet's answer, and I suppose it is. But science has always had room for poetry, because metaphors help us carry landscapes too large to hold by data alone. If you are listening while cooking dinner or folding laundry, here is the summary your hands can keep. Small beings tried something new. Their waste changed the weather. Many neighbors died. Other neighbors invented ways to live. And the long echo of that change eventually gave animals like us the chance to wonder where we come from. The fossils that trace that echo humble, more chemistry than skeleton. But humility is a form of glory, thin lines in cores that tell you when ultraviolet lost its full bite. Grains of sand that could no longer protect a crystal of pyrite. Red beds that whisper of air with teeth. After the crowd left, we took a photograph of the three of us standing beneath the image. The wind off the desert smelled of dust and sage. And I felt a quiet gratitude for the patient planet that lets us learn by leaving records. If the Great Oxidation Event has a moral, maybe it is this. Life is not separate from the environment it builds, and the future belongs to the lineages willing to collaborate with the climates they create. When you breathe in now, the oxygen in your lungs is ancient sunlight made durable by microbes. A gift with teeth and wings and memory. And if that is not a reason to care for this thin film of air, I do not know what is.